lucky we have with us Dr. Otive Ibuzo, who is the founding director of Center LSD, Leadership, Strategy and Development.
Thank you very much.
Welcome to Buharimeter, sir.
Thank you.
So let's get your assessment of the budget making and implementation process in Nigeria. What's your opinion of it? Have we seen a significant improvement in how the process is done?
I think that there has been some level of improvement, because if you look at the trajectory of the history of budgeting in Nigeria, you will discover that during the military rule, budget was read every January, and the expenditure of government had no bearing whatsoever with what was read. So when we returned to civil rule in 1999, the first major change was that, look, no expenditure can be legitimately made outside the confines of the budget, because the budget is law. And in those days, in fact, there was a misconception that budget is a technical issue and should be left to the bureaucrats and technocrats. Indeed, I think around 2001, a leading newspaper made an editorial stating that budget is a technical issue. And I recall very clearly in 2005, when we were doing budget work, I was in Action Aid then. Somebody went to UB and went to the Ministry of Budget to ask for the budget of the state. They asked him to sit down, and they called SSS, and he was arrested.
Oh, wow.
we had to intervene. So I'm saying that, yes, over the years, we've seen citizens participating in the budget process. In the last 3 years, we've seen that the federal government has opened a citizens portal where they put documents that citizens can access about the budget. There is an app, iMonitor, where citizens can monitor budgets and report. However, there is still a lot of depth that needs to be done, because the budget goes in a cycle of 4 phases. The first phase is the phase of preparation, which is done by the executive. The second phase is the phase of approval, that is done by the legislature. And then the third phase is implementation. And the third phase is auditing and reporting. From our engagement with this process over the years, we've seen that citizens' participation is minimal in the preparation phase. So input of citizens is not made into what goes into the budget. And also the phase of reporting and auditing is minimal. In the phase of approval, over the last 2 years, we have had some, significant milestone. For instance, for the first time in history, there was a national public hearing on the budget in 2017. And in 2018, there was a second national hearing on the budget. And at that second national hearing, the National Assembly announced that national budget hearing has become institutionalized in Nigeria.
Wow.
And just today, we've heard the announcement that the third national budget hearing will hold on Wednesday. And they are already calling for memoranda for the national budget hearing. So there is some level of improvement in engagement with the process.
Helping to engage, helping to interrogate, so that we don't keep doing the same old thing. Because people have also said, maybe because we're not engaging it enough, that's why it's not reflecting the social, economic reality of present-day Nigeria. You get to see the same old thing reflected in the budget, the same old costed plan, or the figures broken down over something that has been budgeted for over and over. We never get some of these things done. So trusting that this process is going to open up that space where we can interrogate and make it a bit more efficient.
Yeah, hopefully, because, we've also carried out some studies, and it shows that there is more better alignment compared to the past with the plans and budget, like the economic ERGP, the Economic Recovery Growth Plan, you know. However, like you said, there are still a lot of issues with the budget. For instance, we think that the timeliness of the passage of the budget is a big issue. The budget year is supposed to be from January to December. But capital provisions now for the past 2 years take up to May. And now we are in March, the public hearing is just being held. So there is the need to do everything possible in this transition period so that from the 2020 budget, we return to the January to December budget cycle. And in this regard, I want to use this opportunity to appeal to the President to sign the constitutional amendment that was proposed by the National Assembly that makes it constitutional duty for the President to send the budget by September of every year so that the National Assembly will approve it before December of every year so that we move to January, December issue. There are also other problems with the budget, especially with the content of the budget. You know, for budget to really deliver services to citizens, it must prioritize 4 sectors. Okay. Infrastructure, agriculture, education, and health. But what we see is that increasingly there is no much budgetary allocation to these key sectors. Take education for instance. We see that the budgetary allocation to education is just in the 2019 proposed budget is 620.5 billion, which is about 7.05%. And
recommended is about 27%. UNESCO, okay, it's not that.
Yeah, it's not really the recommended, but I think the important is to compare to other countries. If you compare to other countries like Benin Republic, their allocation to budget was 25% in 2012. And if you go to countries like Ethiopia, in 2012, their budgetary allocation was 30.54%. Even though some people argue that there are, also allocations at the state level and local government levels, and also that if you go to other ministries, like agriculture, you will see schools that are related to agriculture, which are under that ministry. If you go to Ministry of Transportation, you will see marine schools which are also schools, so that the education budget is scattered all over. But there is need to be a synergy so that we collate and know what is actually allocated to education. And one way to also look at it is that if you look at the outcome of education in Nigeria, you will know that it's not satisfactory, which also brings to bear that the level of allocation to education and other key sectors that will lead to services to citizens is not good enough.
Yeah, sir, you said something about citizen participation, which is very central to a democratic process. But when we talk about budget implementation, planning, making, and implementation, you emphasize the fact that there's a need for citizens to engage.
Yes.
And you also mentioned that in 2017, we had the first national public hearing on budget. That was repeated in 2018, and there's another call. How would you assess the impact that citizen participation has actually made? Because there's usually this discussion about we participated. We had a lot of presented our memos. How does that necessarily influence the outcome of the discussion around the appropriation?
Very significant. Let me give you an example. When the 2018 budget was proposed, there was no provision for the basic health fund, which was 1% of the budget, which has actually been earlier approved by a law. And there was serious civil society advocacy, both at the national public hearing and before the public hearing. And in the final budget, it was reflected in it. So there are many things that civil society people raised, which were reflected in the budget. So the engagement is really, really very useful. But what we are saying is that there is the need to deepen the engagement. There are other countries like Tanzania where there is a lot of discussion, town hall meetings to get citizens' input into the budget. We even see that in some states in Nigeria, in Ekiti State, for instance, under Dr. Kayode Fayemi, in Enugu State, in Anambra State, in Ebonyi State, there are mechanisms for getting communities to do projects which goes into the budget. And I think that it is time that we have a national mechanism for getting citizens' input into the budget. Luckily for us, the government has signed the Open Government Partnership. And one of the commitments is to put in place a permanent dialogue mechanism between governments and citizens. And a framework for that permanent dialogue mechanism has already been formulated by government and citizens group. What needs to happen is the operationalization of that framework. And one of the key areas that I think that ministries, departments, and agencies and sectors should actually focus upon in operationalizing the permanent dialogue mechanism is the budget itself.
Indeed. And I hope that we're able to take it, because half the time we have conversation about the budget, we see that the federal one, there are a lot of opaqueness around state budget also. It stays on their website. For the ones who have website, 1 second later it's gone, and you can't even access it enough to know the figures and what you're considering.
Yeah, even states like Lagos, that you would have expected to see the budget in details on their website. It's always very difficult to have that. I had a discussion with a colleague of mine in this sector a few years ago, and the person told me that the last discussion he had with the Lagos state government then was, how can he access the budget? And they only told him, you have to go to the library of the State House of Assembly, which access is actually restricted. So I think openness, it's very, very fundamental. But sir, we've talked about citizen participation, but one other issue that is also very key is the issue of how realistic is this budget. Like Kimberly in the introduction to this program, Kimberly mentioned that government has we have 2.3 million barrels of oil that is meant to be produced on a daily basis, with the exchange rate of $60 per barrel, with the exchange rate of 305 naira. So at $1. So how do you think this budget is realistic?
In fact, that is one big problem with budget for the past few years. In the perspective of civil society, those macroeconomic assumptions in terms of the oil benchmark, the dollar rate, we know that the dollar rate of 305 to the US dollar is far from reality in terms of the parallel market. And even the projected oil revenue of 2.3 million barrels per day is also very, very far from reality, because the actual for 2016 was 1.83 million barrels per day. The actual for 2017 was 1.85 million barrels per day. The actual for 2018 was 1.81 million barrels per day. So it beats anyone's imagination. When for the past 3 years it's 1.8 million. What has changed that we make it 2.3 million? And meanwhile, the OPEC quota to Nigeria is 1.9 million barrels per day. Although there has been this explanation that apart from the OPEC quota, there is what is called condensate, oil condensate, which is not part of that quota. And for Nigeria, it's about 400 million barrels per day. Okay. But it's yet to be seen, because for the past 3 years, the projection has always been 2.3 million barrels, and it has never been met. And the challenge with it is that you will calculate your expected revenue based on that 2.3 million barrels. And if you don't get that, then implementation of the budget will be put in jeopardy. If you ask me, I'm not an economist, but I will think that the wise thing to do is to have a pessimistic scenario, so that if you go beyond it, if necessary, you can have a supplementary budget, or in any case, the level of your deficit will be reduced. But that is the reality we have today. I think that the budget, the macroeconomic assumptions of the budget are not as realistic as it should be.
At the start of this administration, there was so much talk about zero budgeting, but I think we've shelved that to looking and interrogating how we're doing what we're doing at the moment. Dr. Tibe Guzo, the founding director of Center LSD, is our guest helping us to wade through this at the moment. And Samsudeen.
Yes, one of the key issues that people talk about with regards to budget is the issue of transparency in the budget process. And the budget office, a few years ago, I've actually come up with strategy of communicating budget to people, looking at the guide to understanding the budget as well as simplifying the budget process. But yet, there are a lot of conversation about other challenges related to transparency. What do you think about that, sir?
Well, there are a lot of transparency issues with the budget. For instance, the budget structure in Nigeria provides for 7 statutory transfers, including to the National Assembly, the Universal Basic Education Commission, the Nigeria Judicial Council, NDDC, INEC, National Human Rights Commission, and Public Complaints Commission. Most of the details of these statutory transfers are not known. In addition, every year the budget devotes 4.18% of the Federation account to special accounts for ecological funds, which is 1%, development of FCT, 1%, stabilization fund, 0.5%, and natural resource development fund, 1.68%. And if you look at it carefully, there is argument that these funds are not transparently used. In fact, the audit report of the federal government itself, the 2012 audit report, states clearly, and I quote from the report, that there is evidence of abuse in the administration of the 3 extra budgetary funds, that is the ecological funds, stabilization fund, and natural resource fund. And the allegation is that, there is wrongful use of these funds. For instance, at times they were used for servicing budget deficit. At other times, They gave loans to federal ministries. At one time, it was used for payment of identity card programs, and at another, it was used for payment of severance benefits. These are not what those funds are meant for.
Indeed.
And even the latest audit report, the 2016 audit report, has raised a lot of complaints, including the fact that there is decreasing allocation for audit function. So function of audit, which is crucial, especially in a country where corruption is endemic and widespread, there is decreasing budgetary allocation to audit function. So their capacity and ability to carry out that is constrained. And there is also poor overhead releases against already inadequate budget. And the report says that there are several audit queries that are just neglected. So I think that both the National Assembly, the civil society, and the media need to pay more attention to the auditing function.
Well, apparently there are lots of areas where attention needs to be paid, and you pointed one of those critical areas out for us. And like we mentioned, we'll open the phone line to just bring you in the conversation we're having with Dr. TV Uzo here on the 2019 budget. I bet there are other areas you want to question, to make contributions on. You're free to join our discussion here in Nigeria Info by calling on 094600-951 or 0809-5974869 or 0803-123-0293, or just simply send us a message via WhatsApp to 0809-9930-137. And we see the calls coming in. Someone is sending his regard to Dr. TV. It's been a while, sir. He wants to know where you have been. I thought you left the country, but I don't know. Ejike is listening online from Oregon and wondering, well, apparently he's been around and pretty much with us. But let's hear from this caller.
Hello?
Hello?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Family, good evening. I greet Mr. Iguza and the other guest here. So my name is Ashmaya Mechi.
Okay, go ahead.
So my question is, you mean since this government came to power since 2016, let me leave 2016. 2016 till date, Nigeria has been exporting over 1 million plus, about 1.8 million barrels of oil, selling about $50. Sir, please. And we believe this government told us that about 9 million Nigerians are paying tax now. Then are you hearing me?
I'm listening to you.
Yeah, we can hear you.
And we also understand that this government has recovered billions of naira, even some foreign currency. Sir, could you please help us? Some of us who have been asking questions, what has this money been used for? And please, sir, do you think that National Assembly, they are really doing their work? Because the work of National Assembly is to checkmate the executive, their spending, and their implementation of this budget, sir. Some people are not asking questions just for the fact that they are supporting this government. For some of us who are in opposition, we want to know because this is our money. I'm paying tax. I'm paying annually over 60,000 naira. So please, help us.
You are paying what, 60,000 naira?
Tax.
Oh,
I say I'm paying over 60,000 annually. I'm the commercial taxi driver. Yes, sir. Please, we want to know what this money, because as it is today, we don't have light. Let's know what they are using this money for. Even public housing, they are getting off. You not get any.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Well, he said it confidently. The tax might not hold much to you, but he's saying he pays it, and it means a lot to him to know how the money is being spent at the end of the day. Someone says, thank you so much, sir, for coming. And like a question was asked about the state. It seems like we don't even know what is happening in the state at all. For example, my state, Delta State, sometimes you wonder if they work with a budget or anything, because I don't understand what is going on. We need to change the system, our budgeting system in Nigeria. There need to be a lot more transparency. How much is budgeted for, how much is released, how much work is done. How can we measure if we don't even know how much has been released to something that is budgeted, to know when to check it. Civil society are not doing enough in that regard. This coming from Johnson here. So from Johnson, let's take this other call. Hello.
Okay, good evening.
Good evening.
Oh dear. So while we wait for the call to come back, Victor, who is also listening online from Michigan, say, why can't head of ministries come defend their budget on camera? Let them give clear explanation of their budget request. Looking at more thought on that. Keep the calls coming if you have more questions concerned about our budget. Good evening, sir. I read an article today, one of the papers that was saying throw the budget away. I don't think there's enough time to even deliberate this budget enough. I agree with the writer. And okay, I don't quite understand you. An article was talking about an article on the budget. Throw it away. Throw it away. Why? Okay, go ahead, Williams.
Yes, please, I guess you made mention of auditors. Now, the auditors, the day of this only the federation account or the day of this, I want to ask particularly the oil ministry, the NNPC, the system. Since 2015, when NPC came on board leadership, our president has been the oil minister, the country oil minister. And the auditors are using accounting to them after the proceeds of our oil. Because we are used when it comes to what our proceeds is, when it is that oil stuff.
All right. Thank you so much, A. Williams, for that question. Let's see if we can throw one more in and give Dr. Eguzo time to respond to some of your concerns.
Hello.
Hello.
Good evening, Sama. My name is Mommy Zia. They come from Buhari.
Welcome.
Thank you. As now they talk about me, they collect my own from stores. But I want to please send message through the Brother Wages Studio to government. Because Nasarawa State, now I go primary school. And today, I go around that area. When I see the state when my primary school did, I wept. I don't cry because I know to go school. Cry different from weeping. I wept for my alma mater. I beg. I don't know what the government is doing about the state of our schools. If it were to be my secondary school, I would be able to rally other girls for us to do one thing or the other. But I left primary school at tender age. I really don't know one or two of my classmates that we can do something about it. The school don't get me. I couldn't stand it, my sister. And I sure say the government, they collect allocation for education. I don't know what they are doing about it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And somebody wanted to, I had to check the article where UNESCO says, well, going by the document, I think I read something about 2000 to 2015, they recommended, not a strong recommendation, but 15 to about 20% should go into improving education. Looking at the Dakar framework, nothing about 26% per se. So on one hand, the minister who was defending and saying UNESCO did not recommend 26%, but then he did not also tell us that UNESCO was saying improve it a lot, at least between this range. Let's pretend that one is staying in the cooler. Over to you, Dr. Otive.
Thank you very much. These are very good questions. I've been around. I've not gone anywhere. So I've been around. You know, there has been a lot of questions about the total number of oil exported per day and why we should multiply it by the price of crude, and that should be the money coming to federal government. It doesn't work like that. There are several kinds of arrangements: joint venture arrangement, production sharing contracts, and so on. So there is production cost and many things that are deducted before the money comes into the federation account. That is number one. Number two, when the FIRS says that they have collected 5.3 trillion, it's not that 5.3 trillion that goes into the federal government budget. It is divided between the federal government, states, and local government. So it's only a fraction of that comes. Government has recovered billions, and they should be encouraged to recover more and spend it transparently. National Assembly, are they doing their work? They are trying, but they can do a lot much more. A lot, especially in the area of oversight. There is need to do more. What is happening in the state? Some of us have engaged with it. In fact, he talked about Delta State. I come from Delta State myself. And recently we analyzed Delta State budget from 2007 to 2019. And what we found out was that budgetary allocation to Delta State Governor's Office is more than 7 ministries put together.
Wow.
In the same Delta State budget, allocation to the House of Assembly is more than 6 ministries put together. In the same budget, allocation to Office of the Secretary to the Government is more than 5 ministries put together. And that same budget has allocation of 21 billion naira to Office of Former Governors. So, you can see why Success attended Okodiebo Primary School that is in that dilapidated state. Why can't head of ministries defend their budget in camera? Presently, they defend their budget before the relevant committees. The initial process is covered by the press, but they now go into, I agree that it should be public. It will bring more openness to the system. Somebody talked about throw away the budget. I don't know the details of that article, but what we need to do is to engage the budget, is to make the budget open and transparent, and to make sure that the budget delivers services to citizens. And we have sufficient knowledge today across the world on what needs to be done to make budget deliver services to citizens. I didn't really hear those questions about NNPC, but NNPC, the oil sector, there have been efforts to improve publication of the accounts in recent years. But we still need to deepen that process and make sure that everything, all the opacity within the oil and gas sector is removed. Somebody talked about the state of primary school in Nasarawa, which made him to weep, not cry. And I think that it's a huge challenge across the country. The federal government has allocations in the UBEC, which states are supposed to provide counterpart so that they access it to develop educational infrastructure. But the challenge we have is that a lot of states cannot access it because they've refused to prioritize education. And so they cannot provide the counterpart. For those who want to provide the counterpart, they are not ready to follow the oversight because you must show what you have used the money for. That's why they've not been able to.
So we have the money lodged
there and people cannot access it. So I think that what we really need to do as a people is to take more interest in governance processes, is to take more interest in the budget, but more importantly, to participate in politics. So that there are many good people in Nigeria. There are many good people in media. There are many good people in civil society. There are many good people in business. Why can't they participate actively in politics? And these ideas that they have, they can bring it to transform Nigeria. Those people who can transform Nigeria are present in Nigeria. The problem is that the political process is in such a way that it brings out the worst among us to rule us. And Plato advised us that if we refuse to participate in politics, we will be ruled by our inferiors.
Well, I think that sums it up nicely. We need to get involved in all of these things. You need to be that corridor where you can influence things also.
Yeah, I think after this, we need to take the discussion far beyond participating in the budget and making process, because implementation is also very key. And part of that is the issue of openness in the implementation, because the implementation of freedom of information is very key to this. I think there will be an edition of Buharimeter that will be dedicated for conversation around freedom of information.
And also the NOCOPO process.
NOCOPO, yeah.
The procurement process and the open government partnership. These are all procedures to open up the space. As citizens, we must engage it, push, and ensure that the openness is not in theory, but in practice.
Thank you so much for coming around. And for the listeners, we'll be having discussion next week on oil and gas, focusing on the refineries. I think Nigerians are more interested in the functionality of our refineries, and I think when we talk about functioning, the crude oil that's being sent out of the country, we have like 450,000 barrels of oil that is allocated for refineries, local production. And we also know that, openness in the report of NNPC. We'll be having discussion on that by next week.
All right then. I think this is a safe place to draw the curtain. I want to say a very big thank you to Dr. Tive Ibuzo, Founding Director, Center LSD. Thank you so much, sir, for being on the show.
It's my pleasure.
Delighted to have you on the show. And Samsudin, thank you for returning to the show. Look forward to having you here next.